Chicago Tonight, Black Voices is made possible in part by Fifth Third Bank and by the support of these donors.
At Fifth Third, we believe when diverse voices are heard and empowered, communities are made stronger, lives are made better, and the future holds greater promise for all. That's why we're proud to support Chicago Tonight Black Voices. Together, we can make a difference. Together, we can drive change.
Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight Black Voices. I'm Angel Ito. Brandis Friedman has the evening off. Thanks for sharing a part of your weekend with us. On the show tonight, an effort to plant more trees in underserved areas. We'll look at the uneven tree distribution throughout Chicago and how that puts some neighborhoods at risk. A new movie shining light on the history of racial passing, the Chicago ties, and why it still resonates today. The local creator of a hit Netflix series and a local historian take us to the South Side for a Chicago history lesson.
Popping has to do with tensing your muscles to the beat of the music. As simple as that.
And a Chicago popper shares the dance moves he's been doing for decades. First off tonight, Chicago is set to invest $46 million in tree planting over the next 5 years. Mayor Lori Lightfoot says the city will plant 75,000 trees and prioritize neighborhoods that have been underserved and disproportionately impacted by climate change. Now, trees can help improve air quality, reduce flooding, and offer several other health benefits and social benefits as well. But the distribution of trees throughout Chicago is far from equal. According to data from a 2020 tree census by the Chicago Region Trees Initiative, the tree canopy coverage in Chicago is 16%. Neighborhoods with the least amount of canopy coverage can be found on the south and west sides. Joining us now with more are Lydia Scott, Director of the Chicago Region Trees Initiative, Lillian Holden from Open Lands, a Chicago nonprofit that focuses on fighting climate change and preserving nature, and Cheryl Johnson, the Executive Director of People for Community Recovery, an environmental advocacy group based in the Altgeld Garden Homes on Chicago's far south side. Now, Lydia, I would love to start with you. Can you explain to us exactly what tree canopy coverage is and the potential benefits?
So tree canopy is the upper portion of the tree where the leaves are. The leaves are what create the benefits for us. So they're what intercept stormwater, they intercept air pollution, they help reduce temperatures by cooling the air around them. And so the trees themselves function as environmental mitigants for some of the challenges that we experience with climate change. And it's the canopy, so the larger the tree, the more benefits that tree provides.
And so I'm curious to know, throughout your research and work, what have you found out about how trees are distributed throughout the city?
Well, we did, in addition to the tree census that gave us information on the decline of canopy in the city of Chicago, we also did LIDAR analysis. And LIDAR is imagery that's flown and it picks up individual trees. And so we know where each of the individual trees across the entire 7-county Chicago metro area are located. And we've loaded that information into an interactive online map that's available on our website, chicagorti.org, that enables individuals and organizations to be able to go on and see where canopy is located in conjunction with some of these benefits that I talked about already. Air quality, heat, flooding, and vulnerable populations is a metric that we also included in there. So we can take a look and see where canopy is located and where we have high vulnerable populations, which would include communities of color. And we also can see where we have increased heat, where we have poor air quality, and we see a correlation between the reduced canopy and some of these adverse impacts that we can experience, such as increased heat and poor air quality. And that enables us to be able to focus our work and share that information with our partners and anyone that's interested so that they can focus their work to have an impact in communities that are particularly vulnerable to these challenges.
Absolutely. And now, Lillian, I know Open Lands works to grow the tree canopy. How exactly are you all doing that? And can you just touch a little bit more on why growing trees is a priority?
Yeah, so Oaklands, we have three different approaches to growing trees within the Illinois region. First, we have our community engagement component, where we provide access to trees through our community tree planters grant. We also teach community members how to maintain trees, prune trees, and plant trees through our Tree Keepers program. I'm a tree keeper. This is my tree keeper card. So just to speak upon like how diverse the tree keeper population is. And then second, we also have workforce development job readiness. We have a Arborist Registered Apprenticeship, which is a 3-year training program implemented to support the creation of green jobs. It helps grow our region's tree canopy while also having an active role in alleviating Chicago's youth unemployment rate and providing green, relevant, and well-paying jobs. And then third, we have advocacy and strategic initiatives. So we do things like we partner with diverse organizations on advocacy efforts, strategic initiatives, humanity-based collaborations, and we facilitate grid pruning. And we have our urban forestry advisory board, and we talk to aldermen for more support.
Now, in your work, have you noticed any inequities in how trees are distributed, particularly in maybe certain neighborhoods receiving more or less?
Yeah, definitely. So when it comes to disparities in tree canopy, there is a distinct difference between the tree canopy in the north side versus the south side. And trees are a part of our city's infrastructure, and it reflects the investment of our city's infrastructure historically and contemporarily. The perspectives around trees vary, and a community's views of trees may be positive when there's also the flip side where it mirrors disinvestment and gaps in awareness towards the benefits of trees.
Absolutely. Now, Cheryl, we know that trees are a great resource to improve air quality. And according to Chicago's 2020 Air Quality and Health Report, Chicago's most polluted neighborhoods can be found on the south and west sides. And as you can see in this map here, the worst areas are highlighted in red. How would you say that pollution has affected your community and residents?
It has a major impact in our community, a negative impact in our community. And it's not just something that just started yesterday. We're going back as far as 1860 with the contamination, when the development of the industrial Lake Calumet area. Where our guests sit, it should have never been built because it's built on a sludge landfill. So when you're talking about growing trees, we have the life expectancy of some of these trees, oak trees in particular, that can live for maybe about 400 or 500 years. And it's almost like half time their life. You know, a lot of our trees do not survive in our community because of the abundance of pollutants in the air. You know, but we also have to make sure that, and mostly time, it has a negative impact, particularly in the summertime, because most neighborhoods, poor neighborhoods, particularly Black neighborhoods on the south side of Chicago, do not have trees. And we don't have the accessibility to many of the programs that is out there to allow that community to be educated about maintenance of trees, pruning trees, for an example, or just getting a tree card from Open Lands. But, you know, you have to be optimistic to say, in this work, because we have to fight for equality all the time. And it's not just about human health, it's about our whole ecosystem in our area and the protection of our trees.
So how do you see this investment in trees helping these neighborhoods?
Aesthetically, it's going to make it look a whole lot better, you know, but it's all contingent upon if it's not a vacant home. That is where they're going to be putting these new trees. I think that, you know, not only do trees play a major role, but the photosynthesis they create from these trees is really important to our quality of life. So you never can go wrong with planting trees on an annual basis.
Absolutely. And Cheryl, I hate to cut it there, but I want to thank you, Lillian and Lydia, so much for joining us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And up next, a new movie explores the practice of racial passing, what that is, and why it's still relevant today. The new Netflix movie, Passing, centers around two Black women who can both pass as white but take different paths, one choosing to live as white, the other Black. Set in the 1920s during the Harlem Renaissance, the film is an adaptation of the 1929 novel by Chicago author Nella Larson. Now, Larson was born on the south side of Chicago to immigrant parents. Her mother was from Denmark and her father was West Indian. Being mixed race herself, Larson struggled with her racial identity, turning that experience into a novel. Joining us with more now are Danielle Sanders, managing editor at the Chicago Defender, and Carol Bell, who wrote a book review of Passing for NPR. Ladies, thank you so much for joining us. I want to jump right in. Danielle, I want to ask, the first thing viewers will notice when turning on this movie is that it's in black and white. What are your thoughts on this production choice?
I thought it was so perfect. I thought it was beautifully shot. And it actually helps to show the ambiguity. Everything's not always black and white. Sometimes there are shades of gray. And I thought that really tied into the subject matter of the book, the way they shot it. 1920s Harlem, beautiful.
That's so interesting. I'm not sure if I would agree with that, only because it can be a little bit hard to perceive, but I want to go ahead and now show a clip from the beginning of the movie. It's an exchange between the two women, Irene and Claire's husband. Let's listen. Carol, there is a very obvious tension that's being felt here. What's your reaction to this scene?
I love that scene. I thought that was really well translated. There are parts of the film that I think don't translate the fear and anxiety and the tension quite as much as the book. But this particular scene I thought was beautiful. Alexander Skarsgård has that very strange combination of charm and menace.
Yeah.
Right? Just this
explores it's the loss that comes with racial passing. Let's take a listen from the scene in the movie where Claire, who's passing, talks about the loneliness that she feels. Danielle, I want to ask, can you touch a little bit on this inner struggle that she's talking about here in this scene?
I really loved what this film did, which was show not just the isolation and the loneliness that one would feel when they choose to actually leave family, leave their culture, leave their identity. It's not just a loneliness and an isolation, it's fear. She has a genuine fear of some of the basic things that we take for granted, such as even having a child. The amount of relief she felt in giving birth to a child and the fear that comes with the potential of having another one. Living that life of constant worry of feeling like you'd be found out or exposed had to be terrifying. And the longing of something authentic, the longing of, and she mentions it several times, feeling safe. You're free and you're safe. So the idea that passing somehow made Black people safer in society is really two sides of the same coin. You really aren't. You weren't safe as a Black person living Black, and you weren't safe as a Black person living as a white person. Your fears were different and rooted in different things, but you were always constantly on guard and scared of being found out. And that has to be incredibly lonely and isolating because there is no connection to your culture at all.
And I hate that we're running out of time because obviously there's so much that we can talk about in regard to this film, but I do want to end, Carol, by asking you The film is set in the 20s, but I would argue that people can still resonate with the experiences today. Is there anything that you would like to note on that?
I think that we've gone through so much racial turmoil. Obviously, we've always had, racial conflict and systemic racism. But I think that for a while, before the 2000s, there was this strange period of a lot of things being suppressed and not so much on the surface. And obviously now in the past 10 years, a lot of that tension is really up at the surface. And so I think a movie like Passing, that is so about racial tension just below the surface, right? That is there ready to sort of like bubble up and create incredible, potential violence, potential fear, potential loss. I think that is something that we can relate to, because I think we have lived through a period of like that. And we're grappling with the reality of things brought up now.
Absolutely.
In a more open way.
Absolutely. A lot of parallels between the film in the 1920s, as we said, and today. I hate that we have to wrap here, but our thanks to Danielle Sanders and Carol Bell. Thank you so much, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Up next, 2 Chicago social media stars tour one of the South Side's most prominent neighborhoods. One of Chicago's most beloved Twitter personalities went national last September with the premiere of the Netflix series Chicago Party Ant. Now, the show is based off of the outrageous yet witty fictional Twitter account Chicago Party Ant. The creator behind the account, Chris Witowski, has roots primarily in the city's west suburbs. It wasn't until Witowski's adult years that he moved into the city and began exploring the neighborhoods as seen on the show. But many parts of the city are left out. So I decided to call up another Chicago social media star, local historian Sherman Dilla Thomas, to give us a tour of one of the South Side's most prominent neighborhoods, Chatham. From Soldier Field to Drinks of Malheur, these Chicago entities, as portrayed on the Netflix series Chicago Party Ant, primarily highlight the city's north side. But across town on 75th Street sits another Chicago entity that folks line up for every day beginning at 12 p.m. sharp, Lim's Barbecue.
You gotta get a rib tip. Okay.
Located in what is referred to as downtown Chatham, but is technically in Greater Grand Crossing, Lem's is a South Side staple that's been feeding Chicagoans since the 1950s.
Great, thank you.
Goodness that Chatham offers doesn't end there. It expands throughout the neighborhood. So we decided to take a tour and ended up on the front porch of a classic Chicago bungalow.
I couldn't believe that they smoke it with wood-burning fire every single morning. But it was cool, man. I never really come down here, and so it was really cool to see like a piece of history from this side of town.
Dilla, who describes himself as a neighborhood historian, agrees.
Right now we're sitting in a part of the bungalow belt in Rogers Park, Jefferson Park. A lot of places gap bungalows because that was the new available housing.
He's recently gained popularity on TikTok for his creative breakdown of Chicago history.
Chatham saw the construction of the Chicago beloved bungalows, as well as very large apartments. Chatham is full of unique and beautiful architecture. Unfortunately, Chatham, like some other Chicago Southside neighborhoods, were under racial restrictive covenants which prohibited African Americans from moving in. Chatham is home to some really dope African American companies that have changed the world. At one point, there was about 24 African American millionaires living in Chatham.
Damn.
Right? People who, Reggio's Pizza, right? If you're ever in the airport, Reggio's Pizza comes from Chatham, Soft Sheen. The guy made the Jerry Curl, like poured the chemicals in LA, but his whole team comes from Chicago.
Witowski says this tour helped him better understand how connected the city is as a whole. He hopes to break those neighborhood misconceptions and barriers with his main character, Diane, in the coming seasons of his Netflix show.
Chicago is a city of neighborhoods, but I think what happens a lot of times is you kind of stay in your little pocket, like you stay in your bubble. And so coming down here and seeing like this, this street you could find on the north side of Chicago. It looks exactly the same, you know? And so, I don't know, it was cool for me to come and experience how similar it is. I think that Diane, she probably grew up like in Beverly or Bridgeport or something, you know, and a lot of people say that even on Twitter, like she's a South Sider.
I think we're at our best when the Diana Party Aunt comes to the South Side to come visit a Jerome, right? Like that's when Chicago's at its best, because if you look at those intersectionalities, that's what makes us proud, right? There's a party aunt on the South Side too. Her name isn't Diane, it's probably Keisha.
Visit our website for more information on Dilla's educational TikToks. Chicago Party Aunt is now streaming on Netflix. Up next, we introduce you to a local artist with some poppin' dance moves. Stay with us. A few weeks ago, we introduced you to a violinist who's one of dozens of Chicago artists receiving cash grants to pursue their careers. This week, we're featuring an artist with a dance style that started in the late 60s but has evolved through the decades.
My name is Charles Bledsoe, better known as Poppin' Chuck. Popping has to do with tensing your muscles to the beat of the music. As simple as that. You would stop and tense. You tense and then relax, tense and relax, tense and relax. When I was a kid, I started off what is called locking, and that was in 1973. I was 5. So I started doing that, and then there's one dancer in that group. It was called Campbell locking, and one dancer was a robot. His name was Charles Robot Washington. And he had a group here in Chicago in 1967 called the Robot Brothers. Now, when he came on the scene, nobody had never seen it before. And when people saw it, everybody just like, oh man, it's the most amazing dance. And they would do it at parties, and then you saw it on Soul Train because they performed on Soul Train. It's really about the response you get from the crowd, because the thing is that I'm an older person, so usually they see younger kids kind of doing our dances. Like, oh, that's something the kids do. I'm like, no, I'm 54 years old. So we've been doing this a while. And they see us like, you guys are so limber and you can still do the dance. Yeah, because we love this dance. We've been doing it since we were 12. I like the attention, but I also like the inspiration I give the kids. And they're like, oh, wow, that was cool. How'd you do that? Because that was me when I was a kid. How'd you do that? That's so awesome. So I like the inspiration I give the kids when they see it.
Now, Poppin' Chuck received a $30,000 award from the Chicago-based nonprofit 3 Arts. The organization supports women, artists of color, and disabled artists, all in the Chicago area. And that's our show for this weekend. Be sure to check out our website, WTTW.com/news, for the very latest from WTTW News, including the latest on the murder trial of Kyle Rittenhouse. And if you're watching us on Saturday night, know that you can also catch Black Voices and Latino Voices on Sundays beginning at 10 p.m. And join Brandis Freeman and Paris Schutz next week at 7 on Chicago Tonight. We leave you now with some more dance moves from Poppin' Chuck. Now for all of us here at Chicago Tonight Black Voices, I'm Angel Ito. Thank you for sharing a part of your weekend with us. Stay healthy and safe. Good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a personal injury law firm representing dozens of families in the crash of a Boeing 737 MAX 8 jet. Mr. Clifford is the lead counsel in litigation in federal court in Chicago.